living a full and well life is put together, authentic.
We feel it.
Take care of ourselves.
Hello and welcome back to the Wishing You Well podcast. I'm Amy.
And I'm Catherine. And today on Wishing You Well, we have an interview with Matt Hopkins. He is the owner of Healthspan, which is in Miami, very close by Revive Center for Wellness offices. And Healthspan and Matt, they are all about recovery, rehab, biohacking, and so much more. Cryotherapy, infrared sauna, PEMF. Oh my gosh, I could keep going. He talks about all of it. He defines all of it for all those confused about all the words that I just said. He talks about all the benefits and all the amazing things that people have discovered about these services. So stay tuned. Listen up. These are really great.
Yes, this was such a great episode. I learned so much, and I feel like so empowered to like take more control of my health and well-being after talking to him. Like it feels like so accessible. So yeah, definitely excited for you to check this one out.
So Matt, before we get into talking about you, talking about Healthspan, we want to check in. We always check in. We ask ourselves or our guests all about self-care. We want to know how you're doing. What does your self-care look like these days, or just overall, wherever you want to take that?
Well, I am fortunate enough, I think, to have a secret little weapon that not a lot of people might have access to. So I try to prioritize as much as I can. Our clinic and Healthspan in general is really kind of based around providing the body with the tools that it needs to do what it does best, which is heal itself. And so we have a wide variety of non-invasive modalities that do these things. And it's funny because when new members come and they join, they say, well, how often do you do this stuff? And I would like to say more than I do. But obviously, as you're building a business and multiple locations, it's like my days are crazy. But I really try to be good and schedule it like I know I need to and soak up as much of that as I can. It's funny. Sometimes the professionals are the ones who don't do it. You know, we need it the most. Like, you know, massage therapists never get massages and personal trainers never train themselves. So, but I try to be very good. I try to do better. I can always do better.
Are there any specific treatments that you really enjoy?
So we have another question I get a lot is if you only had a few minutes, what among these things would you do? We see a lot of people that they come in with these inexplicable symptoms and they've seen multiple physicians and they've had multiple diagnoses and they're on multiple medications and nothing's working. And so it seems to be like at the root cause of this, there's some cellular thing that's going on. I don't think we have enough energy. We don't have enough gas in the tank. And nutrition is very important, obviously. Sleep is very important, obviously. Movement is very important, obviously. But if you look at the triangle, movement is a big pillar of it. Nutrition is a big pillar of it. But there's this base of cellular something. And I think it's this kind of wall of chronic inflammation and pain that people are faced with. And so that's really kind of where we tried to focus a lot of our attention on that pillar piece. And so that the cellular healing aspect of it is profound. And it doesn't take a whole lot, but connection to the earth, cellular energy, mitochondrial health, these kinds of things. And so using simple tactics like cold therapy and hot therapy is pretty profound. You know, sunlight and red light therapy, really good. Grounding and PEMF therapy, amazing. And so I think the ability to mix and match these things appropriately really kind of unlocks a whole world of healing that we didn't even realize was that important. And so when these people come in, it's like, well, this stuff seems to move the needle a little bit. I think it's, for whatever reason, I'm going to do it. It works. And we know it works after a few years of clinical empirical evidence. It obviously works, but you know.
Yeah. Well, I'm so excited to hear so much more about all of that as we get into our episode. But I definitely relate to being someone in the kind of like helping healthcare field and kind of deprioritizing, or not having enough time or space or energy to also practice what I preach. It's tough.
Right. And I mean, not to make this a big long pitch, but we do like to kind of meet people where they are in their journey.
Mhm.
And so if you had 5 or 6 minutes, there's something we can do. If you have 20, there's a little more we can do. If you have all day, then there's a whole nother thing we can do.
Yeah.
And so I guess I didn't really answer your question, but if I only had a few minutes to do something, a cold exposure of some kind would be really, really beneficial. I think that something as simple as sauna therapy, the research is unreal when it comes to longevity and all-cause mortality risk benefits. And it's an exercise mimetic. And so if I don't move well and I don't have time in my schedule to exercise, but I do want some bang for my buck, a hot sauna is tremendous in what it can do to the body. And one of my favorites is PEMF. I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but if I only had to pick one thing, I would do that. I love it. I think it's powerful in what it does to the body. So I guess that might answer your question. Yeah.
Cool. No, thank you.
I did that one time, actually on Mother's Day. It was a nice little Mother's Day treat.
Oh, that's
And
good.
yeah, it was great. It was so cool. I mean, just lying there for, what was it, like, I don't know how long your services were. I think this was like 20 minutes or something.
Yeah. 15 minutes.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I really liked it. All the light therapy happening with it and like the music that was playing. It was pretty great.
Yeah, there's the cells in the body know what that is. It's very DNA nourishing, I tell folks. And PEMF specifically is in the Earth's atmosphere, in the Earth's crust. So our connection with the Earth's surface is very important. We don't get enough of that. So we can kind of hack that a little bit. I was just talking about this with somebody. It's interesting. If you look, there was a guy, long story short, there was a guy who, he's the head of the Hyperbaric Association, and he lived underwater for like 90 days. And he was preparing to do this. He was going to test all of his biomarkers. He basically built a little hyperbaric chamber that he could live in for months and months at a time. And just about every biomarker he measured improved. And you could extrapolate that he actually kind of slowed and reversed his aging just by being in that environment. So going down, going up, astronauts have a tremendously difficult time. And so it's kind of interesting to think, well, going away from the Earth's surface provides nothing but problems. And then going deeper, getting more oxygen, more pressure is good for you. It's an interesting connection, Like we got to be on Earth. So then you got Elon. Elon's not thinking about this, I think, when he's talking about Mars. Like, we need some hyperbaric chambers. We need some PEMF. We need red light. Like, he's not thinking about that part. Elon, if you're listening, come see me.
Well, again, so much to learn there. I'm so like I'm trying to digest what you're saying and formulate. So I have so many questions. So I'm again excited to get into it so much further. But also want to check in with you, Catherine. How are you? I know you had a big move going on. How are things? What's your self-care been like this week?
Yes, had the big move, did the thing, and now we are in. I think today was like the third morning that I woke up there, and now it's like actually starting to feel like my home, which is so cool. It's such a cool feeling to have. And I haven't lived in a house in a really long time, so like having that aspect of the coziness like really set in. And since we're talking about saunas and all that jazz today, I'll
what are we going to get for the home?
Okay, that's what's funny is down the line, my husband and I, we totally geek out over saunas. We're sauna lovers. And so down the line, we would love to have a sauna, like maybe one of those barrel saunas outside. I don't know. We haven't figured that far into it yet, but we would love a sauna. So instead of, that being a gift to him, because I can't get him a sauna, I gave him a housewarming gift, quote unquote. We both moved in there and he didn't need a gift, but I actually wanted it. So I got him, a coffee table book all about saunas. And I literally like for the aesthetic of it, it's a really pretty looking book. And also, it just tells you about every single different kind of sauna, and there are tons. And so now, like in the evening, we can like flip through and start planning our life around this sauna, but also have this really
subliminal messages. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. You know, if we're talking about last week's episode, you know, maybe I'm manifesting a sauna into my life somehow. Maybe.
Yeah.
Or maybe
Love that.
yeah, we'll see. So I'd say self-care, I sum it up a little bit, would be like kind of leaning into those little things, like whether it's just like the giddiness that I got of like giving him this gift, or giving my daughter breakfast in our kitchen that's like ours now, and like cleaning off the countertops because I actually care about this place. Yeah, leading into all those little things.
Nice. I love the coffee table book, and that you could potentially be unknowingly manifesting a sauna. That's great.
Yeah. No big deal. How about you, Amy? How are you? How's your self-care?
I had shared with you, Catherine, before we started recording. I'm stressed. You know, I think that like right now there's like that meme that goes around August being like one long Sunday, and that's kind of what it feels like. I feel like I have a little bit of like the prolonged Sunday scaries, because end of August, beginning of September is such a big transition time with, especially within our team. We have, you know, people offboarding. We have 8 or 9 people onboarding. I'm teaching 2 classes in the upcoming semester. It's like, it's like I say yes to all of these things, and then I don't realize like the impact that that's going to have. And so I think now that we're in mid-August, I'm kind of recognizing like all of these shifts that are going to be taking place and what that's going to require of me as they happen. So definitely feeling stressed and overwhelmed, and trying, minus my mini rant to Catherine, you know, a few minutes ago, I'm trying to channel all of that into kind of really thinking about what I really can control and what really helps me feel grounded. And I've talked a lot on this podcast about movement and exercise, and how that's like my church. Like that's where I feel the most connected to myself and to just something bigger than me in a way. And so I've been really, really pouring into my workouts, trying to get as much out of them as I can, using them as a space to kind of direct and channel all of this anxiety, stress, angst, frustration, and as a way to just make sure I'm minding myself, like taking care of myself too. So like as we speak, I have like my workout clothes under what I'm wearing on, like I'm ready to go right after this. And so that's kind of what my self-care focus has been, is like doing things that make me feel good, that make me feel empowered and in control, as we get into this like shaky transition time.
It's great.
Yes. Yeah. I'm the unofficial ambassador for Orange Theory. So I've been, you know, having that kind of built-in kind of internal competition is very helpful. It's like marathon month at Orange Theory. So like just focusing on like accruing miles, like just having something, again, external to focus on that's not work has been super, super helpful to me.
Are they splat points? Are those splat points?
Yes, splat points. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm racking up the splat points and the miles this month. But yeah.
I'm so glad you're prioritizing it. It's like, you know, we talk about all the time how things can get so stressful.
Mm-hmm.
All these other things in your life start to slip away, movement being one of them. And you've like really just put this sign up, like, I will not compromise this movement no matter how hard things get right now. And that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I've done things that I haven't really given myself permission for, like to do in the past. There was a 12:15 class yesterday, and I just left work in the middle of the day and I went back to work after I was done and all of that stuff. And just trying to, again, prioritize that. I'm better for everyone else when that box gets checked off. So yeah.
I think I can tell you from like a professional, you know, expert standpoint, being in the movement industry my entire adult career, it gets harder and harder to get back on the horse when you fall off. And we all do, and it happens, but it's critical to hold yourself accountable, even with small little things. It makes all the difference in the world, you know?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, you know, in having and growing a business, it's so easy to have that be like a very convenient excuse to not attend to those things. And I let, you know, so much of the building of this, I've let myself fall off the priority list, and I just can't do that anymore. So
I'm right there with you. With you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I recently had, on Memorial Day, I had an emergency appendectomy.
Oh, wow.
And it was, you know, all I wanted to do was eat hot dogs and hamburgers. And I was like, something's not right. My belly feels weird.
Oh no.
And then ER, it was a nightmare, but it was like a month of no activity, couldn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
And I pushed it. I tried, and I shouldn't have, but I did. And I was like, oh man. And so I'm just now 2-3 weeks back on the horse, and I'm like, I feel all rusty, you know what I mean? But onward and upward, you have to do it.
Oh yeah. Oh gosh, that's scary, but glad you're on your recovery road here.
Yeah.
But I know we've had, you know, a little bit of a preview about you and your business and all of the services and support that you provide to the people that you work with. But I'd love for you to share with us and our listeners about you, who you are, what you do, your journey, all of that good stuff.
Where do we begin? I think like most movement people, we start in athletics. And so I was an athlete growing up. I played ice hockey and baseball at a high level. In college, I was pre-med in the beginning. I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon, but those classes are early. And they're in organic chemistry. I don't care who tells you it's hard.
Stupid.
So I wanted to be, you know, the medical route. I bounced around physical therapy school. I was an athletic training major. All the health sciences, basically. And around that same time, my brother had a traumatic accident, like a slip and fall. And I think I was 19 at the time. And then it was, if there was a poster child for opiate abuse and the system in the early 2000s, it was him. And I watched this from an outside perspective of like the medical system, and then orthopedic, and then physical therapy and chiropractic, and more pain meds and pain doctors and pain clinics. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. And to see someone who had everything kind of going for them really get funneled into this track. And I mean, now, of course, there's so much publicity around it, like painkillers on Netflix and all this stuff, but that stuff was real. And it was soon, a year or so after that, where, you know, his life had kind of spiraled out of control. And I said, dude, you got to come live with me, hang out with me. You got nothing going on. You have no work anymore, whatever. Let's just hang out. Let me get my hands on you. And I basically just kind of used him as a living case study. And I was in PT school at the time, and I thought, you know, they're not really getting it right either. I think that there's a very antiquated approach to the whole medical community. I've been very respectfully at odds with them my entire career. And I still think a lot of it is antiquated, you know. So I basically just dedicated that part of my life to fixing him. And we had some really good results. I still think he's, to this day, one of my best case studies. But I learned so much about the body through that aspect of it, because I went to 12 steps with him. I went to meetings with him. I saw this. I saw it. I picked him up off the ground many times. I know what rock bottom looks like and feels like, you know, and of course, when it's your family member, you even more so want to, you know, lessons I've learned of where the line of enabling starts and stops, and when to say no and turn away. I mean, like really good. I think it makes me a better coach. It makes me a better connector. And so, you know, long story short, I started to specialize in pain management. So I have a very unique approach to the movement and nutrition side. And for 22 years now, that was my main focus. And so I started to have a kind of a stable of clients who all had some crazy stuff going on with them. And they're like, I've tried physical therapy, it didn't really work. I've used chiropractic and it hasn't really helped me. Let me see what you do. And so I get all the fun folks, all the crazy pathologies. And I got to a stage where I was doing evaluations with people, and quite often, if you're adrenally fatigued and your central nervous system is compromised to the point where touching your skin gives you a reaction, then a radical change in movement is not the appropriate place to start. Even a radical change in diet may not be the appropriate place to start. There has to be something else going on. So I started to look into functional medicine and root causes of disease and ailments. And I went down all these rabbit holes and I was like, whoa, there's some cool stuff in here. And I think we have to figure out a way to push pause on that chronic inflammaging problem and at least take a step back so that we could take steps forward and come up with a game plan. So then I switched focus, and I mentioned that triangle earlier. I really do think that this was a glaring missing piece in the industry. And now, thankfully, to, I guess, social media and podcasts, and maybe this is a beneficiary of the pandemic, the information hose that we have. But now people are seeking this stuff and curious about it, and getting information. And Andrew Huberman and Peter Attia and Joe Rogan and these people are in your living room all the time. So it's great for us and our awareness. But I thought that I pivoted basically into that side of things. And so this was a few years prior to the pandemic, and started to put together a list of things that I thought were most impactful and figure out a lane to stay in. We're not a medical spa. I don't want to poke and prod you. I don't want to deal with pharmaceuticals. I don't want that kind of intervention. I just want root caused approach to health and healing. I want it to be simple. I want it to be understandable and empowering. And so we basically created this business model, and it's been great. I can share with you too that although my brother was one of my biggest success stories, we lost him about 2 years ago. And it was a period at the end of a sentence that I knew would come, but I still owe a lot of what I do to him. So he'll always be there. But it was a messy, messy time, I think, especially on the mental health side of things. I hope we're on the other side of that. But that's that. So, we are now in a place where we can provide services that actually do move the needle in health and healing and pain and inflammation and all that stuff. Yeah.
Wow. There's so much there in what you shared, and thank you for sharing all of that background and sharing about your brother. And I'm sorry to hear about your loss. That must have been
Thank you.
so difficult. And like I feel like my head is spinning with so many reactions and questions to things that you shared. But it sounds like taking this kind of functional medicine approach, taking this root cause approach. My bias is certainly in that lane too. How have you noticed that has supported people in kind of like looking at root cause, kind of finding what's underneath? How have you noticed navigating that process with people?
We are purposefully not medical.
Mm-hmm.
And we are partners with USA Sports Medicine, is a very successful physical therapy chiropractic clinic. They do regenerative medicine. They're good friends of mine. And we have a few locations with them. They are a wonderful business. They provide great service. It gave me a vantage point of looking at insurance providers and how that side of the business is run. Mm. And that's another I don't know if I like all that. That's a whole nother party. And so we wanted to deliberately make a little wall, a little line in the sand when it comes to that kind of stuff. So we're careful about what we say. We don't treat anything. Mm-hmm. I'm not a physician. I went to school long and I should have 2 PhDs, but whatever. I'm that guy. I'm just a geek. I read too much. And, I want to, we have a couple years now of quote unquote clinical data and empirical evidence, but I'm just telling stories at the end of the day. And I'm happy to share those stories. And when I do, people are like, holy crap. And so one of those stories is we had a member who was a stage 1 lymphoma, tumors, and the tumors reduced in size after about 2-3 months. We've seen people with cysts and fibroids disappear. Ovarian cysts just disappear inexplicably. We had a woman, she's about 59, and a woman. So those are 2 strikes against you in the bone density column. Sarcopenia, was going to get a procedure and injection for that. After about 90 days, her physician said, I don't know what you've been doing, but you're no longer sarcopenic and we don't need to do this. So not only did she improve bone density, but she reversed the score and got better. We've had people.
Are these people coming in and doing every service that you have? Are they doing selected services based on what ailments they are experiencing?
We want to be as individualized as possible. And there are protocols that we see that work that we recommend. That being said, you could throw a dart in the room and hit something that's going to help. And so in those specific cases, we have a pretty good idea of what's going on. But at the end of the day, there are so many factors there. Hyperbaric therapy, for instance, is like the king. And so the things we've seen and are able to affect with that is just unreal. I mean, we have autistic members and cerebral palsy, dementia, Alzheimer's, stroke, cognitive decline, concussions, TBI, and that's just the brain. You've got post-operative, you've got cosmetic procedures, orthopedic procedures, you've got general health, longevity. I mean, unreal. So it kind of opens the door to, all right, now we can make a game plan here and actually tailor something specifically to you, again, based on time and how dedicated you're going to be. In those specific cases, though, there are some underlying commonalities. PEMF is one, red light is one, hyperbaric is one. And so that just coincidentally turns out to be our version of the superhuman protocol. 10X Health has a version of it. They use EWAT. We use hyperbaric, and it has proven to be very, very successful.
Can you, imagining that someone who's listening has no idea what any of these services are, what PEMF stands for, like, can you just, like those 3 that you mentioned, like, can you just describe?
It's a whole nother podcast. This is a whole other podcast.
Brief overview, definition.
Yeah. Okay. The layman version.
Yes.
So I'll go through the whole list. We got the hyperbaric chamber is really just the therapeutic use of oxygen in a pressurized environment. Now, we have different technologies where we can manipulate the pressure, i.e. we can manipulate the amount of oxygen you're getting. And the combination of the two are tremendous for a wide variety of healing, right? So that's one. We can manipulate.
Wait. Even more layman. Like someone is coming in, they are walking into a freezer. They're getting in one of those barrels. What's the situation?
Freezer cold.
It is cold.
Sauna hot. Freezer cold. Yes. So the hyperbaric is pressure and oxygen. The red light is using light, specific frequencies of light, to do a whole bunch of cool things in the body. One of which is mitochondrial health and sensitivity and genesis and all of that. Hormone balance is a benefit. Hair growth, skin health, collagen, elastin, mood enhancing, because ATP is all about energy. We've got the sauna is hot, and turns out that the body's reaction to heat has a whole lot of cool stuff to it. Cold, same thing. Turns out that cold is pretty good for you. There are a wide variety of things like cold shock proteins, etc. Catecholamines in the brain. PEMF is pulsed electromagnetic field therapy. That's a mouthful. PEMF. Really, it's just like an electromagnetic field all around your body. Now, all the cells in the body have a membrane, and the membrane has a polarity. So the electromagnetic field reacts to that membrane and repolarizes the cell. So it's literally like exercising the cell back to life. It's providing the juice it needs to function. So downstream, you get a whole ton of benefit from the cell getting switched on. It's really like plugging yourself back in to the wall. And we, for a million reasons, need a little bit of that juice. So we like that as a number one on the list because it kind of sets the table in the body cellularly. For instance, if you want to, maybe you have a, this would apply to you guys probably in your world, like cognitive decline, right? So pre-Alzheimer's, pre-dementia, a lot of that is said to be caused by a lack of norepinephrine in the brain, right? Because norepinephrine is a neurotransmitter, is an anti-inflammatory in the brain. Well, cold therapy specifically releases a ton of it. So something as simple as exposing yourself to cold temperatures could potentially undo a lot of that cognitive decline, specifically in pre-cases. So if I were to do some PEMF, get all the cells fired up and energized and ready to accept stimuli, and then throw you in the cold or the red light or the hyperbaric, I would potentially get a lot more benefit from those things.
Wow. Oh my God, I have to tell my mom. She's so afraid of getting Alzheimer's.
And then you couple that with contrasting is popular because then there's, vasodilation, vasoconstriction happening. Vasospasm is particularly good for strengthening arterial walls and moving fluid around. So you're getting some of those benefits. I mean, the science is kind of simple. We're still uncovering some of those real mechanisms of action, but unreal. If I can working out is great. It's hard.
Yeah.
Nobody wants, working out is hard. Sitting in a sauna, pretty easy.
Right. And so in some ways it's so accessible, in terms of, able-bodiedness and things like that.
Right.
So I might be taking us completely sideways, but you mentioned earlier, just, you had called it inflammaging. And I'm wondering if you could...
You brought this up again. I was like,
you
did
could
you say that? Okay.
It's great. If
It's
you
a
could
thing.
talk about that a little bit more, and why I'm making an assumption, like as a society, for the most part, many of us are chronically in that category.
Yes. I think, to my prior example of assessing folks and figuring out that we were getting hit in the face with this wall where we couldn't really move forward. There was just this chronic whatever going on in everybody's body. Dr. Mark Hyman talks about this in his book. Depending on who you read, if you take all of the root causes to just about everything you can think of, it really only comes down to a dozen or 15 or so buckets. And those buckets are like epigenetic deterioration, protein folding irregularities, microbiome dysfunction, mitochondrial dysfunction, etc. And inflammaging is becoming a term used to describe that inflammating chronically something that's going on. And the chronic aspect of just continual exposure to lifestyle and environmental toxins and the food we eat, and we're undermineralized, we're undernourished, and that just, the body's central nervous system just cannot keep up with that. And the result of that is some pretty scary permutations in cellular function. And so the term to use to describe that is inflammaging, because it alone will knock years off your life. And so
Dang.
that's a thing. That's a term that's becoming a little more popularized now to describe basically that. And I mean, as a nutritionist, it's hard to shop in the grocery store. I have a hard time. And if I was going to go to Whole Foods and just come back with all of the real food, I would not need a cart, and it would take 3 or 4 hours to find it.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So the average person is really set up to fail. And the things that we think are acceptable and nutritious aren't. And we're incapable of sourcing the food we need to be healthy because of the quality of our soil and the quality of our water and the air and yada, 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 yada. So we've got a couple strikes against us just out of the gate. Right. So, yeah. Inflammation. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, it sounds like, as you're saying, like, even if we are at such a disadvantage of being able to, as you're saying, source the food, the nutrients that we need in order to live well and be well. And so it sounds like we aren't really set up for success. And so a way to not even be maybe preventative, but to counteract the world in which we live. A lot of the treatments, I'm doing air quotes for those of you listening,
we have
treatments, modalities,
services.
Thank you. Can really help to support us as humans living in the world that we live in 2024.
We throw this term around, biohacking, quite a bit. When people say, well, what do you do? What business are you in? It's a good one. I'm not sure. It's very new. I say, oh, we figured out a way to optimize people's quality of life. There's my elevator pitch. But really, what do you do? Well, we're not invasive. We're not medical. We're not treating anything. It's difficult. The term that I see a lot and hear a lot is biohacking. My definition of that is using technology and advancements in nutritional science and health technology to circumvent those buckets of root causes that I mentioned. That's really what it is. So you're hacking the system, quote unquote. So if I'm not able to get red light from the sun or PEMF from the earth or, whatever it is, we have some tools that can hack that system a little bit. An easy example is, like, say you get injured. Well, the blood in your body, its job is to move metabolites and healing cofactors and oxygen around. But you're injured, so your vasculature is compromised. So you can't do that. Your body can't do it. That's why it takes so long to heal. Some tissues are very poorly vascularized anyway, so it takes a long time. Ligaments and tendons take forever sometimes. The hyperbaric chamber bypasses that because it just puts oxygen everywhere in the body. So that's a way to kind of hack the system.
So
by the
cool.
way, Kiss the Ground is a great documentary if you want to learn more about soil. That's a great one.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Woody Harrelson just narrating that up. I love that movie.
Yeah. If I could do like a passion project and didn't have to worry about money, I would do something about soil conservation. I think that is like the lowest hanging fruit we have for climate change, for health, for everything. Minerals. We all need more minerals.
Well, and it's so interesting because you're talking about like people needing to really ground themselves and how you're offering this service to allow for that. Like Amy was saying, it's like you're making something accessible that like really just should be so naturally accessible to all of us, but it's not for so many reasons based on like where we are in 2024. And it's such an interesting thing because it's like, hey, I'm going to give us something that like we used to just have and we used to just do. And now we're not. And you're just putting something back in that is missing. And that's incredible.
There are a few times in history when these modalities have tried to make a foot forward. Hyperbaric has been around 1,000 years, maybe, as soon as we could kind of make metal. We were able to do that. There are hyperbaric chambers that were constructed like hundreds and hundreds of years ago. In the pre-World War II effort, there was a famous psychologist who made basically a sanitarium out of a hyperbaric chamber and had a tremendous amount of research. So he was basically recreating a hyperbaric environment, a pressurized, oxygen-rich environment, and doing psychotherapy. And the results were unbelievable. And when the war effort came, they repurposed all the metal and they made him dismantle his project. And a lot of that research was then lost and obviously funding and all that. And boom, right? In history, that has happened again a few times where hyperbaric has started to make a comeback. But because of the American Medical Association, insurance companies don't want to cover the cost of it. They don't want to admit the efficacy of it. There's very much conflicting research. Insurance companies would commission research studies to disprove the efficacy of lower pressure chambers because they're very affordable. People can use them. They don't want to cover the off-label treatment protocols. And even in those studies, the sham groups were statistically significant enough where they had to throw the study away. They couldn't even disprove the efficacy because even the sham group saw a result. It was like, I want to say like in 1908 or something, Nobel Prize was red light therapy. PEMF has been around for 80 years. It was originally invented for racehorses. to prolong the life of, I mean, obviously follow the money, right?
Yeah.
Racehorsing in the 40s, right? So somebody's like, I think maybe we should use it on us. And look, amazing.
Okay, that makes me so angry.
Yeah.
Wow.
We part of our business, I mean, we really, really wanted to make these things affordable, because when I was doing due diligence and coming up with the plan, I went all over the US to try to experience these things and find these things. There weren't a lot of stuff in Miami, and it was ridiculously expensive and usually reserved for celebrities and athletes.
Mhm.
And, Michael Jackson used to sleep in a hyperbaric chamber, the Kardashians and all that stuff, Justin Bieber.
Mhm.
And I was like, we have to make this affordable and accessible to everyone, because A, it only works if you can do it. B, you have to do a lot of it. So let's make it, let's scale it so that we can at least provide the service to people. And in the very beginning, we didn't even market at all. We just said, just come. If you like it and you feel compelled to tell someone, just do that. Like fair trade. And that's what happened. And so 100% of our introductory year was just about referral. It was all referral.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, how powerful that is. I mean, that really speaks to the efficacy, the I hate using this word, but like results, impact that your clients were having.
Right.
That it was all referral based. The word of
Right.
mouth is so meaningful.
It was so rewarding at the same time, and I think critical for the trust piece.
Mhm.
Like, and I always joke about this, when I'm having a bad day, I read my Google reviews. It's amazing. I love it. Very fortunate and blessed. But you get trust. And
Yeah.
even if people decide, well, we're not going to continue with you anymore, but we're going to refer our friends and family, and people still, I believe in like a friendly goodbye, like, I'll see you tomorrow. Doesn't have to be today. It can be tomorrow. No today is yes tomorrow. But,
Yeah.
we're providing solutions. We're solving problems. We're not trying to gouge everybody.
You said before that these are people that have tried so many different other modalities to try and get out of pain and just try to feel better. When they end up turning to you, is it usually through that word of mouth where they've just heard, hey, like Healthspan and Matt, like he's really got the solution for you, or like is it like you've been on their mind and like they know about you already, or they know about these services, or like are they coming to you fresh? Like I don't like Amy was asking, like what does PEMF even stand for? Like are these people even aware of that this exists?
It's a good question. When we first opened the door, I remember, so when we were doing our R&D and planning, business planning, a few years prior and into the pandemic, that was an opportunity, I think, to really shrink to grow, like absorb content and dive in and get all of those kind of nuts and bolts figured out and come up with a package that I thought would work. At the same time, I noticed that all my colleagues and mentors in the field and all the voices, like the Peter Attias and the Ben Greenfields and these folks, are going to disseminate all this information. And their role is absorbing all the research and disseminating. So I thought our job has to be to put something in place so people can actually take advantage of this information. So I'll let them do all the marketing. We need to focus on getting something in place to capture these people. And so that was kind of the pivot we made. We're like, well, we need to get open as fast as we can, because soon people are going to start to learn. But when we opened the doors, it was a little early. And so people would come in and the tour was something like, I've heard of cryo, but I have no idea what this other stuff is. And now, 2 years later, almost everyone has an idea of what something is. They've at least heard the term before. So that's really encouraging. And there still is an education gap. I think a lot of our obligation is to keep educating and promoting, why and how much. But there's certainly been a humongous change in those 2 years in terms of education and the consumer. And I think that's awesome. We have competition now that we didn't have before, which also I guess is good, right? And so to answer that question, I think it's a little bit of both. in the very beginning, I called upon my network and the relationships that I've built and the reputation that I have, which thank God is a good one. Now we're getting searched. We have organic leads coming in. We have people we had a person call us. This is a true story. We had a member on the beach in Barbados, and they were talking to another person on the beach next to them, staying at the same resort, who lives in Miami. And they're like, they start talking about us somehow. And then that person, when they came to Miami, came in and joined. And they're like, I heard about you through this guy in Barbados. He's no longer a member, but he's like, oh yeah, you told us about you. I came in to check it out. I was like, oh, that's awesome. Holy crap. Wow. Okay. And so now I think we kind of have a little bit of all that little synergy going on. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
The long game.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I was thinking I've heard about you from two unrelated like sources too. So like the word of mouth is working.
Cool.
You're doing it. But I know you were saying, especially at the beginning, that like the people that some of the people that come to you are sort of these like edge cases, these people that have maybe tried a bunch of things and haven't been able to get kind of the relief or the support that they were needing. But what I'm also hearing you say is that maybe if we don't even have a specific ailment to address, we can still benefit from
100%.
the services.
Yes.
Yeah.
I took the step of coming up with the avatars of our target markets and all the sub cohorts of them, because that's how I am. And so there's 12 of them. And I'm very specific with the demo and what they're called. They gave them little titles. There are those people that are the biohackers, and they know this stuff almost better than I do. And they're asking about the wavelengths of the red line and what equipment we use, and et cetera. But a humongous bucket is, I just want to feel better. And I want to take a proactive, almost prophylactic step where I can get ahead of all of these things. Some of it is maybe there's some congenital things in the family. Maybe they're at that point where, 10 years ago, I think the demographic in Miami was a very party-centric oriented, the Wolf of Wall Street kind of mentality. And I'm going to be at the nightclub all night and I'm going to party, I'm going to live it up. Now they're looking for retreats. They want self-care days. People want to optimize their cognitive ability. People want to be a badass in the boardroom. It's a shift, for better or for worse. It's a shift for sure. And so we can then begin to have conversations around, well, what specifically and why, and then coach through specific use cases and how to optimize all the things that we do. So there's a little bit of everything. We do have folks that are in desperate need. They're a beep, 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 help me, white flag. But then there's that curious person who just really wants to utilize these things because they're now becoming more mainstream, and everything in between. I think it's when we first opened, I think we underestimated, I certainly did, the impact. I knew kind of through my lens of what could happen. From what we've seen and what we've dealt with, it's mind-blowing, the testimonials and the use cases and the things that have happened. And it's, as the research starts to come out more and more in our favor, it unlocks even more doors to what potential outcomes can happen, especially when you look down the line of brain health and cognitive decline and things like that. It's like, man, this is really cool if we can get ahead of this stuff, and the idea now, the diagnostics are catching up. Now there's AI and tools where you can pre-screen cancer 4 or 5 years out. And the combination of both, I think, is really interesting. We're working on a diagnostic piece. I haven't found one I like yet, but I've been talking to physicians and friends. And I think that might be the next little foray that we try to go into, because measuring doesn't get measured, it doesn't get managed, right? But that's an interesting thing, the diagnostic piece of it all, looking at, biological age and telomere length and things like that. But
right.
Yeah, the sky is the limit, I think. It's
That's
still
so
very new.
cool.
It's all very new, I think, still. Like
Yeah.
as sexy as this stuff is, and cold plunge and all this, you know, there's some profound things behind the scenes going on. And if we can come up with a very clear understanding of why, I think the trajectory into the future is going to be amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels like it's just the scratching of the surface. Like it feels really exciting to think about, you know, if we were to have this conversation even 2 years from now, like what more would be discovered. It's very like just very cool, and what a time to be alive in another way, you know.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
I do know, obviously we're talking about you and your business here in Miami, and there are different, places that have similar services, but say there's someone that doesn't have access to a place like Healthspan. Like what, if anything, can they do to kind of support their health or well-being, outside of that?
We have the poor man's biohacking, if you will.
Yes.
There are some simple things to create some interesting changes in the body. One of which is your at-home cold plunge. Miami's very difficult to take a cold shower. It doesn't exist. I'm from Chicago. There are times when the water doesn't come out. You know, it's cold. But if you took a bowl of ice water, for instance, and there are a lot of receptors in the chest and face to cold, and do a little face dunk, you get some interesting overlapping benefit of a whole cold exposure. You still get some catecholamine release. You get some anti-inflammatory response. You get some of that cold shock response. It's interesting. So that would be a practice that you could do. Start with a 10 or 15 second little boom, work your way up to half a minute or so. That's one way to kind of do it at your home. If you have access to a cold showers are fantastic. Alternating hot cold is a great way to get some of that same benefit. I think contact with the earth is critical. And so a at-home biohack around PEMF would be grounding. So getting feet in the sand, feet in the dirt, feet in the grass, you know, as much as you can. And that connection to earth, as you mentioned, Catherine, is very important. And then the morning sun. So the first 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so is all red near infrared light. So the UVA, UVBs haven't kicked in yet. And so that is a very healthy, very therapeutic dose of light. So if you can get some of that exposure, especially in the retina, that's fantastic. So that first 15, 20 minutes of exposure in the morning is fantastic. On the way down too, but in the morning is better. So you can do your little, there's your cold plunge, there's your red light, and there's your PEMF, which, by the way, is our Healthspan trio, if you're interested in coming down. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
No, and again, like super accessible. I was going to ask how many seconds to put your face in the ice cold water.
It's gonna be cold.
Gonna be cold. So like not to wimp out with like 3 ice cubes and like get it real cold. Okay.
Get it real cold. Get it real cold.
Well, Amy, I feel like you might know more than I would around the cold exposure as it relates to anxiety, and like that as like a as like a helpful treatment for like experiencing anxiety. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, like from it getting in the cold, like from our perspective, like is helpful as a quick way to manage manage you physiologically to then kind of hack it from body to mind. So if you lower your body temperature, then that will help your brain, almost like trick your brain into cooling down as well. And so like we often would like prescribe get cold to kind of really quickly decrease like your emotional response. But we also like sort of prescribe, I'm using that in quotes as well, getting cold as a way to practice working through discomfort. And so again, of course, there are these other benefits that we're not as knowledgeable in, but like just the practice of of getting uncomfortable is so useful in mindfulness and grounding in general, and in learning how to regulate, again, yourself emotionally through doing it physically. And so we love a mind body approach in our practice as well. And so that's the way that we use cold specifically here.
That's great. We have, so red light therapy in and of itself has a lot of mitochondrial ATP benefit, and it's used quite a bit to reset circadian rhythm, and it's used to treat seasonal affective disorder. And so if there's anxiety, PTSD, for instance, you can kind of reset the body's ability to manage those ebbs and flows. PEMF is a great cellular detoxifier. And so it helps kind of stave off and manage some of that inflammation that squeezes and moves lymph around. And so if you can get waste out and you can get mitochondria firing, and then you blanket that with a nice cold exposure so that you're getting serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine, you can kind of tamp some of that anxious. Yeah.
That's cool.
We see that a lot.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's great.
Matt, is there anything else about what you do and what you've seen that you'd like our listeners to hear? Anything we missed?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think awareness is still a missing piece. You know, we have a lot of curious folks coming to us organically through search. We have a lot of people that have experienced services, referred people, and they're coming in. But I think, I don't know, we're still trying to figure out that piece of how to kind of get the word out to make sure that people can experience these things. I can tell you just from my own knowledge that there is really there's a top end and like from a competitive advantage standpoint, a lot of the competition have, by way of how they've structured their business, created an environment and a price point that is a little out of reach for most people. And the equipment is expensive. I know we bought it, you know, like it's hard to scale and be able to keep things reasonable and convenient and affordable. And that's what we are really trying to do. And I'm not hating on that, by all means, get that experience and go do that. As long as you're getting the care in some way, I'm all for it. But I want to reiterate I feel that it's important to meet people where they are. I think it's important to deliver good service and hospitality first. I would rather you leave with a wonderful experience, and, you know, I don't want it to come down to nickels and dimes, you know? So we will find something together. We will find a course of action. We will figure something out. We're in it with you. And that's kind of our underlying little exclamation mark. So I could just put a little punctuation on that. Yeah.
I love that. One last thing I wanted to ask you. I know you referred to kind of like the world that we live in. Like we have this information hose, you had called it, and that's great. And it also can be overwhelming to kind of sift through and how to figure out who to trust and who's reputable. Like, in addition to the documentary you mentioned, like, are there other, whether it's podcasts, people, books, like that you think if people wanted to like learn a little bit more about this, are there resources that you?
We have a library in Healthspan that are kind of
great.
Matt approved, if you will.
Awesome.
Let's see if I can go through the list. I think Andrew Huberman does a good job of providing like an unbiased view. Peter Attia does a great job. I think that Ben Greenfield is a good voice. I think that Dr. Stephen Gundry is good. Dr. Mark Hyman is good. Lane Norton is a popular podcaster who tries to be almost like a police officer and conspiracy theorist guy, you know, so he's a contrarian view. Man, who else?
You gave us a good starter list for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. No, thank you. Again, you got us off to a good start there, but thank you. Okay. Well, I mean, I learned so much. I feel like I've learned the tip of the iceberg, and I'm, Matt and I realized that we are like literally a couple doors down from one another. So I'm excited to come in and check some of this stuff out myself.
Please be my
so
guest.
Thank you for being here. And
yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you again, Matt, so much for being here. And thank all of you for listening, for following along, for your reviews, for following us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please also check out our YouTube channel to view our other podcast, Reactivity TV, and you can find us on YouTube at Reactivity TV. You can follow along with us on Instagram at Wishing You Well Pod, me at Amy Albero, LCSW, and Catherine at Catherine Van Eyck. You can also check out Revive's Instagram at ReviveCFW and our website, revivecfw.com. Send us any emails with questions, feedback, guest ideas to wishingyouwell at revivecfw.com. Thank you as always for being here. We will be back with more. Until then, we are wishing you well.